Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Sherri Mandell, who's here to share with us her new book, The Kabbalah of Writing, Mystical Practices for Inspiration and Creativity. So welcome to the show, Sherri Mandell.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh my goodness, what a great honor it is to have you here, and what a profound book. I would love for you to share with us your journey of your travel to Israel that changed your life.
That's a long journey. I'm not sure we have time for it. But in short, I grew up Jewish, but I didn't know anything about Judaism. I had no Jewish education. And when I got to Israel and found out more about my religion, I was so excited by it and interested in it. And eventually I began to study some of the Kabbalah, and I learned about the Sefirot. And once I learned about that and, other mystical elements of Judaism, I just felt very connected to Israel and to my religion.
Well, you go in great detail in your book about it, and I found that it was so transformative. So why did you feel like now is the right time to write this book?
I actually wrote it a while ago, and it was sitting around for a while. And then I just went back to it. Actually, I teach a group of women here in Jerusalem, and I've been teaching them for over 10 years, the same group of women. So because I always have to come up with new material, I've learned a lot about writing through teaching. And I just felt like I was going to lose the material that I was teaching if I didn't go back to that book and put it all in the book.
Well, I'm so glad you did. You've got so much in this book. It's just such a gem. I'm going to probably start, I think, right here on desire. And you talk about desire as a hidden engine of will. What do you mean by that?
I mean, in order to will ourselves to do something, we have to have desire. We have to want something. And actually, desire is the engine of the world because, it's all about creation. And even God desired a world, right? He desired to have people in it, and he desired to create human beings and the world. So actually, the whole world runs on desire. And it's very unfortunate when you lose desire. Some people who are depressed, that's what they lose. They lose their desire. And desire is something that keeps us alive because we always are missing something. And in missing something, we work to attain it. And we sometimes create from those places of lack.
So what made you interested in just understanding the Kabbalah and how this relates to writing?
Well, I first learned about the Sefirot. First, let me define the Sefirot, because the Sefirot are 10 channels of God's creative expression. So they're really 10 strains or 10 ways that God expresses himself or herself in the world. God, of course, God keeps part of himself above. I'll use the masculine, where he doesn't relate to the world, but when he does relate to the world, he does it through these 10 Sefirot. And I just found the whole notion of the Sefirot kind of like a divine design and an architecture that can work for everything, for thinking about everything, but especially for writing, because you could say that first of all, the Sefirot in Hebrew, words have roots, and the words that associate with that root are important. So Sefirot is close to the word sefer, which means book. So you could say that the world is God's book, and we all have a story in that book. And part of why I encourage people to write or to express themselves is because it's important that we tell our stories, that we share our stories, and sometimes that we transform our stories through imagination. Because imagination gives us freedom, and it liberates us from the lived experience. Because we can talk about what we wish had happened or what might have happened, or we can imagine an image that can reverse or change the story, the imagery in the story as it happened. So we have the possibility of healing through writing.
Do you think most people suffer from doubts or they're afraid to be vulnerable?
Oh, totally. Yeah. First of all, I'm like that too. Whenever I'm in a writing class and I have to share my work, I am always afraid to share it because it's a very intimate expression. But I also want to tell you how writing helped me because my son Kobe was murdered when he was 13. That was 22 years ago. He would be 35 now. And, you don't get over anything like that. But I started writing his story after he was murdered. And he was murdered in a cave with his friend Yosef Yishran. They were murdered by terrorists in Israel. I was writing a lot about the cave and the canyon because that's very close to our house. The two boys, they skipped school and went hiking in the canyon. And then that year, I had a lot of experiences with birds and birds' nests. And I wrote about that as well. And when I was putting the book together, that was one of my first books, The Blessing of a Broken Heart, I realized that I could divide the book into two parts. And the first part was called The Cave, but the second part was called The Bird's Nest. And the cave, of course, is a place of darkness. It's closed in. It's hard to exit. Like Kobe was killed in a cave, and near my home, it's one of the biggest caves in the Middle East. And if you go in there without light, you can't find your way out. It's over 100 rooms. But I realized that the reverse image was the bird's nest, because the bird's nest is a place that's open, a place of birth, it's a place of flight, and it's a place of freedom. So when I connected those two images, not that I got better, because it's a very long process to live with grief and trauma, but it gave me an image to work with in my imagination, an image of freedom, and an image that connected me to something healing. Instead of being stuck in the cave, it gave me something to follow that was beautiful.
I'm so sorry for your loss. There's nothing that makes that go away or better or anything. So I'm just so sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
When we look at your writing, do we use our emotions as inspiration? Is that where we should really come from?
I think there are very few rules in writing because you can use anything as inspiration, but the point of a story is the story itself, what you see, what you experience, or what you understand. Well, I should say there's usually two stories. Let me try to clarify that. There's the story of what happened, and then the story of what it meant to us. And until you connect those two parts of a story, so that the inner story is the emotional story, it usually comes clothed in an outer story. And once you connect those two parts of the story, there's really the possibility for healing and transcendence. And there's a professor, James Pennebaker in Texas. He did studies on this with college students, and he found that there were actual improvements of health when students wrote about difficult experiences and then connected them to emotion.
Do you find that this book can really change our lives?
Well, I think, writing can change one's life. And I think looking at the exercises for sure and thinking about them in your life, because it gives you the ability to understand what, some aspects of your life, and then the ability to transform them on the page. So let's say you've had any kind of trauma, you have the ability to use language or imagery to, I wouldn't say transcend it, but to provide alternatives, provide an alternative way of understanding it. But I think writing and this book, it also gives us the inspiration to just look at ordinary life and see something like the glory in the wonder in ordinary life. It gives us the ability to look around and to always thinking, like when in my day, I'm always looking for a story and I'm always looking for an image. And also, I'm always looking for something interesting. Like I just read an article about snails, and I found out that snails, at least the snails here in Israel, and probably all of them, but some of them they were originally came from the sea. And so that's why they come out when it rains, because they really like the water. And when I started writing about it, I thought about that everything is drawn to its source. So I started with something small, like a snail, and then it became a vehicle for insight. And I think that we need those vehicles for insight because it connects us to something greater, and maybe even seeing the holiness in the world and seeing the divine in the world and giving us the opportunity to stop and to record and to think. I mean, a lot of people now do it in imagery, with Facebook or Instagram, or TikTok, which is also like a wonderful way to do it. But there's something about language, because God created the world with words. So there's something about language that gives us the ability to recreate and to partner with God in creating the world.
So is it then the Kabbalah is really has us looking at a way to be in the present moment?
Does the Kabbalah connects us to the present moment, but it's more complex than that, because it's like an architecture of our expression and God's expression and of creation. So let's say, I'll just give you an example of the sphera, of a few of the spheroids, of these channels or strengths of expression. So one is chesed, which is kindness. And that's a kind of generosity and an openness to the world. And it means also when you write, you can let go of that voice that says, this is terrible. I don't have anything to say. Nobody will want to hear this. And that generosity and kindness is a kindness to yourself, where you just write and you just keep writing. Like, it's called free writing. And if you feel like you're stuck, then you just write, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And you keep going with that. But there's another sphera that's called gvura, which is limitation and restraint. And that sphera is just important, because that's like the second draft, that you can express yourself, but at some point you have to try to limit yourself to see what it is you're trying to say. And the sphirot, even though like I'm talking about them as separate, they always come combined. Because let's say you're a parent and you're spending an afternoon with your children. Like, of course, you're going to be generous with them, but you can't let them eat all the candy that they want, because it won't be good for you as a parent. I mean, it's not good for them, but it will be really bad for you too, because they'll go crazy. So the next sphera is tiferet, which is beauty or harmony or balance. And the world is always in motion. So it's always in motion of like a polarity between this generosity of spirit and then the contraction of spirit, and then finding like a balance or a harmony, but always moving on from that, because the balance is always temporary.
I love how in your book you talk about how kindness has to be used correctly and in its right measure that just fits with all of this. And isn't that true about the kid and the candy? And, we can't, we have to really kind of watch and find that balance that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I think we're always calibrating. And, I was talking about this with my class, the word revision, because, sometimes writing is the main part of writing sometimes comes in revision. There are those geniuses that can just write a first draft and that's it. But for mortals like myself, we have to do a second draft. And revision, it's such a beautiful word, because it means to look again, to see again. to have the opportunity to have that vision of something that wasn't there at first, and to be able to see something that you didn't at first see. So there's always that possibility of looking again and seeing more clearly, or seeing in a unique way or in an original way, and then finding the insight, because that's what we're always working at in writing. I mean, I'm talking about memoir and essay, is always to find the insight, keep sort of struggling with the material till you have found what's waiting there, because the material itself has something to tell you. The text you write has something, some secret that it will eventually whisper to you. And it might not whisper it to you right away. Like, I also write children's books. And just today, I've been working on this book for a few months. And then just today, it happens a lot while I'm driving. But all of a sudden, I realized what I needed to do in the book to make the story more whole. And writing also requires that kind of patience. There's always this need for patience. Life itself requires that patience, because we don't get everything we want. But sometimes we do get things, but we have to wait for them. And that's a kind of faith.
And I mean, in your book, you talk about harmony, and there's all these other topics that go with this. What is one that you think will help people as they start their writing practice?
I think the kindness, which is also, there's another sphere that's related to kindness, which is hod, which means surrender, but it also means like appreciation. So I think that in order to start that writing practice, you just need that kindness to yourself, and also that surrender to just whatever comes, and to allow yourself to just be playful on the page, not to try to be too serious. Well, of course you can be serious. You can, sometimes you can. Philip Lopat, who's an incredible essay writer and teacher, he says that sometimes the blank page is like a kind mother to us. And I also have that feeling when I write, like that the page just accepts me and receives me. And I think that that's a gift that everybody can give themselves, just to surrender to that page and, and let loose. I think probably there's people who didn't have that kind mother. So it might be a little harder to surrender to that page. But it's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to just express whatever you need to express. When I wrote my book, The Blessing of a Broken Heart, I basically cried and wrote for a year. And my friend, Ruchama King-Feuerman, who's also a writer, she told me that the French have a word for that, en pleurs. I mean, I'm sure I mangled the accent, but it means to sing and cry at the same time. So there's also that possibility of crying, and being in sadness, but having also the expression also rise to the level of song, and they're not contradictory.
I can see where this practice is really providing a great healing benefit for so many people.
Yeah, I think everybody wants to be listened to. I think that's one of the most important things in life, is to be recognized for who you are. And sometimes when you write and then you go back to it, it's a kind of recognition of what the text is trying to say. And it's a way of like recognizing yourself, and also giving voice to the different, voices inside of us. Because we're not just, in Hebrew, the word face, panim, it's plural. Like we don't just have one face. We have so many different faces that we live in this world. And so writing gives us the ability to access different personas, different parts of ourselves, different parts of our lives, and also like different wishes. Like, also, you can just write a list. You can just write a list of things you wish for or hope for, or things that happened to you today, or a list of nouns or a list of adjectives. Like, you don't have to, you can be creative about it. And then it's nice to be able to look back and see who you were, then and where you are now, because life is about change, but writing is also about change. An essay is really about it, about change and recognizing. So, giving everybody that possibility of change and belief in the ability to like break free of your past self and become like truer to your heart and to your destiny. I really feel like writing can help people access all those possibilities.
Is there anything that you've learned during your writing process that has been really transformative for you?
Well, I've learned a lot through writing. First of all, I've learned that there's just going to be days where I'm going to feel like I have nothing to say and nobody to say it to, and that I'm going to give up and I'm just going to do something else. And I've learned that that's just part of it. That's part of the process. I've learned also to, try different things with writing. You don't have to just write an essay. You can write poems. You can write blogs. You can write on Facebook. You can write on Instagram. You can write children's stories. Like, try different things and just to keep creating and keep using that raw material of your life as kind of compost for writing, because something will grow there and something will be revealed.
What is one tip that you like to share with your writers and the people you teach?
Well, this is a tip not just for writing, but for life. Like, just sit down, sit down for 5 minutes. Or I use it for housework, like folding laundry or doing dishes. I say, just wash 10 dishes or fold 10 towels. Like, you just have to do 10. So there's also that like tip of just write 10 sentences. And when you give yourself permission just to limit yourself, usually you'll keep going. But it's very hard to sit down. Also, like, make some sort of ritual. Like, probably for me, I write in the morning and I always make myself a cup of tea. Like, it's part of the ritual to get me to sit down, because it is hard to sit down and say, and write. And the other thing is not to think of it as work. And if if it becomes work, then just write a list or reassociate or just, make rhymes and be playful. Try to be as playful as you can be.
Can you share with us the other books you've written?
Yes. So I wrote The Blessing of a Broken Heart, which was about the first year after my son was murdered. And it's kind of like a spiritual detective story, because there were like a lot of signs and wonders that year. And then I wrote The Road to Resilience, From Chaos to Celebration. And that's the 7 steps of resilience, but in terms of a spiritual look at resilience, not a psychological look. And I also wrote a book called Reaching for Comfort, because I trained to be a pastoral counselor. And we have a foundation, the Sherri Mandell Foundation, and we run camps and programs for bereaved children and families. So I wrote a book about learning how to be a pastoral counselor, and that's called Reaching for Comfort. Oh, and my children's books.
Oh my goodness, Sherri, you just have so many great books. I am so grateful that we had you here today. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, if you go on kobymandell.org, KOBYMANDELL.org, I have a page. So if you just do a / and then it's Sherri, SHERRI hyphen Mandell. And I'm on Facebook and on Instagram, Sherri Mandell 10. And of course, my books are on Amazon and Book Depository.
Well, Sherri, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It was my pleasure.
Well, thank you, Sherri. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Kabbalah of Writing: Mystical Practices for Inspiration and Creativity. The Kabbalah of Writing is available to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. And of course, remember to support our indie bookstores. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.